The negotiators from Brussels and London have defined much of the future relationship between the EU and Great Britain. What did they agree on, and who had to give in and where? British Prime Minister Boris Johnson had a small present ready for everyone who is still looking for something to read in a drowsy moment after the big Christmas dinner. He recommends reading The Good News from Brussels, and by that he meant on Brexit follow-up agreement negotiated on Thursday evening. The resignation contract, which has been in force since January 31st, was only the starter, the Prime Minister said in his video address. The current agreement is the feast. This is, by the way, full of fish. So he informed the nation of the agreement in the tough negotiations on fishing rights in the British Northern Sea. Johnson's negotiating partner, EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen, remained more sober and spoke of a fair and balanced negotiation result and a requirement of common sense for both sides. Chancellor Angela Merkel from the Christian Democratic Union welcomed the agreement as the basis for a new chapter in our relations. What is in the long-awaited agreement between Brussels and London, and who had to give in where? Well, let's have an overview there. Fishing. Well, for European fishermen, lower fishing quotas will apply in the future. A transition period of 5.5 years is intended to simplify the adjustment to the cuts. A 25% reduction in catches was agreed within this period. From June 2026, the European Union will then negotiate annual catch quotas with Great Britain. The question of how much access EU fishermen should keep to British waters was one of the contentious negotiating points until recently. While Britain wanted complete control of its fishing grounds, coastal states like France, Belgium and Denmark in particular insisted on maintaining access as before. At around 650 million euros, the industry's economic output is of rather minor importance. In the UK, fishing only accounts for around 0.1% of the gross domestic product, the GDP. For Brexit advocates, however, it had become a symbol of the sovereignty sought after Brexit. The Prime Minister, not least, had repeatedly sought the image of an independent coastal nation. This is countered by the fact that British fish producers export a large part of their products to the EU and are therefore dependent on tariff advantages in return for EU catch quotas. French fishermen had announced protests and blockade actions on the English Channel should the fishing quotas, as now decided, be reduced. What about fair competition? There was another of these points. The protection of the European internal market was the most important concern for Brussels during the years of negotiations. The main concern was that Great Britain should adhere to the labour, social and environmental standards applicable in the EU and receive unhindered access to the market in return. In addition, Great Britain should be prevented from unfairly favouring its companies through excessive state aid. The EU has now been able to assert itself on this point. In the agreement, both sides commit to common subsidy rules. And in the whole level playing field thing, that thing goes both ways. So if the UK raises standards, instead of what Boris was always talking about to diverge them from the EU standards in the other direction, well, then the EU will have to see if they follow this, or there will be tariffs from the British side. So all these negotiations and the agreements go both ways. Premier Johnson had previously vehemently rejected this and tried to override rules that had already been made. European companies that still feel disadvantaged by British subsidies in the future can also sue in local courts. Brussels can impose punitive tariffs if the British fail to abide by the rules, and European companies come under price pressure as a result. London also guarantees not to lower the existing social and environmental standards. And at the same time, as I said, this applies both ways. The government had so far resisted this concession. However, if one of the two economic areas raises its standards, the other side does not have to follow suit. The EU had previously requested this and had to back off according to the previous information, but it still could have consequences with tariffs. And there we are on the implementation of the rules. Another point of contention was how the agreements reached should be enforced. Great Britain had strictly rejected an arbitration of future disputes by the EU Court of Justice. Meanwhile, the EU had demanded clarity about future legal mechanisms and, in particular, jurisdiction by the European Court of Justice. A representative of the British government stressed on Thursday evening that there would be no prominent role for the ECJ. In the negotiations, the British government had repeatedly insisted that the United Kingdom should no longer be subject to its jurisdiction and declared this as the ultimate emancipation from European rule. The EU, however, had continued to demand an overriding role for the ECJ and now apparently had to give up this position. Instead, according to the information so far, other arbitration mechanisms should take effect. And just one small point, the ECJ will still play a role for several years regarding the withdrawal agreement, but not on the new comprehensive agreement. So, what about services? There's a lot of nonsense about services going on, especially in the comments under my videos. I read a lot of nonsense about services there. So let's talk about them. While the explanation on the trade in goods are detailed, the rules for services only appear briefly in the agreement that has now been reached. This is particularly devastating for the UK, whose economy is more than 80% dependent on services, more than the rest of Europe. Great Britain depends on smooth processes in this area, primarily due to its financial location in London. However, a number of issues remain open in this area and should be resolved in the coming months. For the British economy in particular, Brexit is far from history. And I haven't read the whole agreement yet. It wasn't possible, and I didn't want to on Christmas. But I read the services part already. There is a services part in this, but not as broad as the trade in goods part. And services will be treated like from others. I read or heard recently in another video, they will not have the same advantages as Singapore or New York or whatever. Well, they do have a most favored nation clause in there. They will not have access with everything, but at least they do have a most favored nation clause there, and nobody else has full access except the other EU member states. So they are treated less good as an EU member state, but not worse in that case than other third countries. So it is a compromise there, and of course they will still depend on the equivalence rule and so on, but they are not completely shut out, as I also read in the comments. They neither have won on the services and got full access, that nonsense I read there, and they are not completely shut out, that nonsense I read there too. It's something in the middle. I will make far more detailed videos on single issues as soon as I read the whole thing and could go through a lot of these things that are in question at the moment. But I'm in the same position as the UK Parliament and the European Parliament. It's a very short time to go through 1246 pages plus, what was it, 52 pages of additional agreements in such a short time. That won't happen. So I will definitely in the future make videos on the trade of goods, on the services and so on, but at the moment I can only give you overviews with some hints of details in between, but not complete fine print details on a single topic. But what's next? The parliaments of both sides still have to confirm the agreement reached. Before I started filming this, the German government has approved that this deal can be provisionally activated. Later on, the parliaments will have to have their say as well. In Great Britain, the members of the lower house must interrupt their Christmas vacation on December 30th. The approval of the opposition Labour Party is seen as unproblematic. Although, to be honest, I don't understand why they do that. Of course, then it goes through the House easily. But in this one point, I must say, although Keir Starmer is pro-deal, yeah, fine, but from a mere politics point of view, I don't understand why they don't abstain. But okay. On the other hand, there is uproar in Johnson's own party. For many Brexit supporters, the compromise does not go far enough in terms of British independence from the EU, but this alone can't be the point for Starmer. On the EU side, the governments of all 27 member states have to approve the outcome of the negotiations, and as I said, Germany did that today for the provisional activation of this, and as I heard, the 26 others will do or did so the same. Since there is not enough time for regular ratification by the end of the year, the agreement should then be further examined and approved. It should come into force provisionally on January 1st. Then Great Britain will leave the EU internal market and the customs union after the Brexit transition period that has been in effect until then. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my other channels. I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.